I was one time in a place with a very mountainous place on a very high mountain, and I was able to see an incredible, beautiful view. You were able to see the landscape in all its details, with all its very big, a tremendous amount of fineries, to see all the details, to see the whole entire picture. It was an incredibly beautiful view. You felt like you were mamish on top of the world, felt in charge of everything. You were able to see all different types of water, lakes, grasslands, etc., etc. Finally, when we went down the mountain, there was an option to be able to go back up a different mountain to see the view, let's say in a different perspective, or to stay down and walk down in the bottom over there by a river and keep going across for a few miles to be able to see from within. And the reason why I decided to stay down instead of walking up the mountain is because there's two different types of views that a person can see in the world. There's two different types of perspectives, bird's eye views that a person can see. Sometimes you see something from a mountaintop and you see the whole entire picture. You see a landscape, you see the whole entire film all at once. You see it from the beginning to the end. And that's one type of incredible, beautiful picture. It's a feeling of breathtaking. It's appreciative. It's something that gives you a tremendous amount of enjoyment when you're standing up there and seeing everything as one big picture. But sometimes there's a ma'ala, sometimes there's an advantage of being part of the view, of being down there in the bottom of the valley, on the bottom of the mountain where you can't necessarily see what's going on from on top, but you are one piece in the picture. You're a small piece in the picture, you're an important piece in the puzzle, but not necessarily can you see the whole entire view. Not necessarily can you appreciate it, but at least you know and you feel and you get excited by the fact that I am part of that view. I am a piece in the puzzle. I see it as something of fundamental importance. Both are important. Both perspectives have an incredible amount of significance. And therefore, sometimes it's good to be part of one and sometimes part of the other. When we read Megillat Eicha, l'mashal, we're reading the part where Yirmiyahu's describing being in the view. He's in the part of the Purim Beit HaMikdash, in the middle of the destruction, making us feel an intimate feeling to the Churban Beit HaMikdash, what we lost and what we are begging for the return of. And that's where we are. He's part of the view. That's what we call Megillat Eicha, the Megillah that we read tonight. But there's another Megillah that, of course, we are familiar with, probably even more familiar with in detail, and that's Megillat Esther. Megillat Esther is a different type of perspective. It's a perspective from what we call a helicopter view. Megillat Esther is from standing on top of the mountain and being able to see the whole entire details of the whole view. As we all know, Megillat Esther took place over a 10-year time span, 9.5 years. It took a tremendous amount of time, but we read it all in one fell swoop. So we get to appreciate the history as all one shot, just like when I was standing on top of that mountain and was able to see from the beginning to the end, being able to appreciate the whole entire landscape in the picture. But in the end of the day, it took a tremendous amount of time. In other words, whoever was standing during the time of Paras, in the time of Megillat Esther, they were in a different perspective. They didn't necessarily see what we see. They saw maybe a fortunate amount of coincidences. They saw isolated incidents that always have a pattern, that seem to have a pattern. A bunch of maybe very nice coincidences that worked out very well together. But of course, we read it all together in order to appreciate the whole entire picture. Of course, we know the halakha is, when it comes to Megillat Esther, and this halakha does not apply by Megillat Eicha, is that you're not allowed to miss a word. Everybody knows that halakha, that you're not allowed to miss one word in Megillat Esther. You miss it, because the idea behind it, as we're going to describe later, is that you need to see the whole entire picture. You're going to miss the whole entire story if you miss one word. You can't miss a piece in this puzzle, because if you miss a piece in the puzzle, the whole entire puzzle falls apart. You ever put together a puzzle and there's like one piece missing smack in the middle? It like ruins the whole puzzle. You're not going to put it up. You're not going to frame it. You're not going to enjoy it. There's something missing here. There's something very lacking that's very disturbing. As we all know, it started with a certain amount of pirud am, and I'm mentioning this on purpose. Machloket, am mefuzar v'mefurid. That's how the Megillah started, until eventually we all got together as one nation and we were able to go ahead. Mordechai was hated and disliked amongst the people, and as a result of that, that's what led to the downfall of Megillat Esther until, Baruch Hashem, we were able to pick up the pieces. Beseder, that lies the difference between Megillat Eicha, when you're standing in the picture, as opposed to Megillat Esther, where you're standing on top of the picture. So I'm going to do something a little bit unusual. I ask you Megillah if you don't want, but I'm going to just take 5 minutes, maybe 6 minutes, to read to you from another Megillah. We call this Megillah, Megillat Simchat Torah. I just want to take it. It's a few prakim. It won't take long. Don't worry, it'll take a few minutes. It's very short. It wasn't written by a very impressive author. But I just want to read to you a little bit from a Megillah that you could see very similar to Megillat Esther, where we could see the Megillah from a helicopter view. Instead of us being in the middle of a Megillat Eicha, where we're standing in one spot, and it's very hard to appreciate all the tremendous coincidences that we are surrounded by, all the incidents that seem to have some unusual pattern. Sometimes it's kedai just to read the Megillah to be able to see about what's going on in the whole entire story. So we'll start, like I said, it's only got a few prakim, don't worry, with a couple of mafarshim, but it won't take long. I'm going to make sure to be makatzer very much. The first parak starts like this: Vayhi b'yamei Chamenai melech Paras. The Melech of Paras, his name was Chamani, during that time period, Asher bana misvivav chomot, where he created, I'm going to translate the Hebrew into English, don't worry, very quickly, but where he created around him a tremendous noose around Israel. He created around him a tremendous chomot barzel, where he put around him, shel medinot, many different medinot, in order to protect him, in order that he should be able to create what he wanted, what we call a neshek garini, surrounded completely by, from the north and from the south, as we all know, Mimini Michael, Mismali Gabriel, we know that we're surrounded from all sides, whether it's Hamas from this side, from the north we have Hezbollah, we have Syria from the right, we have the Houthim from the south. As one of the big people that was knocked off on the first day of the Iran war said previous to that, he said there's no way we are ever penetrable, because for Israel ever to try to get to us, they have to cross over so many fields, so many people, so many countries that have our ballistic missiles and our anti-plane missiles. They will never be able to get to us, and even if they come to us, we're loaded in order to protect them. He was picked off on the first day, and you can understand why already. Al kol parim, as it continues over there, kamu betoch b'nei Yisrael machloket gdola shel merid betoch ha'am. There was a big machloket amongst the nation in Bnei Israel, because what happened was, during the time of Corona, it was discovered, I'm translating the Hebrew, just so it makes it easier, it was discovered that if they make a minyan in Dizengoff, in the middle of Dizengoff, then they make a Beit HaKnesset, it will be incredibly populated with a lot of people. It had over a couple hundred people at the time, of people that would never go on Yom Kippur to shul. But because it's sitting in the middle of Dizengoff, so why not? You might as well go there also. Just as it's a place that we're familiar with. But Me'at Yehudim, many people came, Besina, Beredifa, Bemacha'a, Behadra, Behafkana. They came against them with a tremendous amount of hatred and with a tremendous amount of macha, and they started to make ruckus of the whole entire place. In the middle of the tefillot of Yom Kippur, they came Zorkim Kisaot, they were throwing around chairs, Talitot were thrown from up and down, Sidurim were overturned, the shelves that had the Sidurim were overturned. They cut the Mechitza in half, very similar to what happened by the Chashmonaim and by the Yevonim in the time of Yevon. Shalom Matzah Kazeh, Shafilu Rechokim Izalzulu B'Yom Kodesh Kazeh. We never found so much of such a amount of Sinah and Tinah that ever happened. Now on the bottom of there, one of the Mefarshim, there's the end of Perek Aleph, but one of the Mefarshim, they bring down that there was a non-religious person who was standing there, who obviously had some type of understanding that Hashem was standing there, and he says, and he reported to one of the people, he says, more than I was mizdazeya, more than I saw this incredible thing and I couldn't believe it, I was mefached. I was actually scared. A person completely not religious. He had a tremendous fear. The merimim yad neged Hashem. Again, these are people who are completely not religious, you understand. And he said over there, then and there, itpalalti la'kadosh baruch hu, I let out a tefillah to Elokim, as he says the words in Hashem's name. Hashem, please don't pay attention to what's going on. Hashem, can you just ignore this? This is really not simple. The Marim Miyad Biyad Hashem, and I'm afraid of what's going to be. Lamaisa, as we know, HaKadosh Baruch Hu didn't answer this person's prayers. HaKadosh Baruch Hu did look at what happened, and he went out with a massive campaign in order to be Mekarev Rechokim, and also, if I could say, get vengeance for what these people did. HaKadosh Baruch Hu didn't forget what occurred, and he went out with a massive campaign of doing a massive kiruv event that causes, we'll see later, a massive bringing back of many people in Klal Yisrael back to where the Mekorot were. Ki kasher yisar ish et beno, Hashem Elokecha yimei asreka. He does it out of love, and when the Kadosh Baruch Hu comes out with these sermons, of course we know that it comes from a tremendous amount of love. So the second parak continues, Vayibe yimim ahem al talefeta be'ein siba u'mesavav. Suddenly, without any type of rhyme or reason, Chamat Melech Rusia al Ukrainian. Suddenly, the king of Russia, decided to go ahead and attack Ukraine for no rhyme and reason. Nobody really understands why, how, what. Give some speculations. And he went to Milchama for Shanim Tovot V'Rabot. There were many, many years during that time period where there were a tremendous amount of casualties. I think they're crossing the million to a certain extent. But suddenly over there, because the whole entire nation went against this king of Russia, and they were upset about what he did. And it worked out, the king of Paras went and backed up the king of Russia, and he sent him a certain amount of help and backup and emotional backup, and went behind him, and was behind him. And the rest of the Medinot of Europa, Nishmar B'Kirbam, they left inside of them a certain fury, a certain frustration for Persia. For Paras, for what we call Iran, they were certain frustrated because here we are trying to take care of an enemy, and you're going and backing him up out of nowhere. That is incorrect. Suddenly they realized who this Iranian guy is about. Suddenly at that time period, Hichlit Sinvar, the Rosh Hamas, Litkofa Yehudim Lifnei Askama Kol Yotzav Mirov Sinato. Because Samana Rasha was so the Sinvar Rasha was such a Sonei Yisrael, he hated us so much he couldn't even control himself. Before even finishing his conversation with the rest of Yoatzim, with the rest of the people that accompany him, which were supposed to back him up, which at the time where he was supposed to lay out this onslaught, he was supposed to have a backup from other people such as Hezbollah, Syria, and Persia, and others. Suddenly he jumped the fence and he went ahead and he was Matkifa Yehudim Mirov Sinato V'gar Meherem V'nezek Rav B'kerev B'nei Yisrael Ad Sha'alchu L'ilchom Negdo, until he caused an absolute war because of the tremendous amount of casualties and the whole disruptive catastrophe that he caused. Baruch Hashem, after a week or two, where we were able to get things under perspective, so only then Hezbollah kicked in, and you don't realize how big that only then is. When people were, as I say on the bottom of the Mefarshim over here, they bring when Hezbollah was attacking many of the denominations, most people assumed that the second one Hezbollah would attack because of, I don't have to get into all the details, we understand we're talking about tens of thousands, if not more, of casualties, that could happen in this country. Aval Kadosh Baruch Hu Amad Berov Yatram V'Tigbar Yad Yisrael b'mivtzah, with many different mivtzarim, b'michad mivtzah Bipurim, which people are familiar with, and many different mivtzaim that were able to Baruch Hashem put down Hezbollah and knock out Nasrallah at that time. Perek Gimel continues, Vayi Berot Hagoy Asher b'Damasek, and then in Damascus suddenly he saw Kisar Tzilo Shel Moshel Syria. He saw that the Syria is the person, that Tzilo, the person who is behind Syria, is not doing so well. In other words, that Hezbollah is down, Hamas is down. Suddenly in Lebanon there was an upturning, and they went to go ahead and attack against a person because he had no backup behind him. And they were able to lower the kiseh from him. They were able to push him up until Harama. And Paras was left by himself, the king of Paras. Iraq wasn't behind him anymore. No one was really behind him. He was kind of on his own. All the surrounding proxies that he had in the process were all there, except for Russia. But Russia tarud be'enyan milchamato. Coincidentally enough, Russia was too busy for the past 2 years taking on their casualties, not realizing how big the war that they entered in. So of course Russia would have been quite a scary event, but he's too busy with his enterprise. Mamela, Paras was left levado, And that's what it continues in Perek Dalet. I'm almost finishing. Bayamim ahem husar hafta'a keter malchut artzot habrit. Suddenly, the Melech of America was put down. The person who was Mirosh Ne'eman Shel Brito Shel Paras, the one who was really behind Paras, and the one who really was giving a tremendous amount of money to Paras, and would never Chas Shalom ever attack the king of Paras, he was put down in a miraculous victory, and was Nimnam Bimkoma, a person by the name of Trump, if anyone's heard of him. Yedid Yisrael v'chafetz b'ikaro, a person who was chafetz b'ikaro, Yedid Yisrael, who cared about them to a certain amount. Asher Amar, ima sefer yashuv machshavato hara shel hamelech Paras, that he worked hard in order to be able to transfer the ideas of Paras, asher choshev le'abed et Yehudim, in order to be able to turn around the ideas and the machshavot of Paras, in order that they should go ahead and stop. At the same time as he was trying to go ahead and do this, the Medinot of Europa also sort of backed him up in order to stop Paras from being too much of a thing. It's not because they loved Mordechai in any type of perspective. They could care less about Yisrael. Only because they're upset about this Agagi guy, this Khamenei guy who's behind Putin the whole way. So they were interested in trying also to stop him from backing up this thing. I'm in the last parak. Don't worry, we're on the anchor here. V'yichabed Hashem at Lev Melech Paras. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, through this thing, when the president was trying to convince Paras to put down his weapons, to go ahead and give in, HaKadosh Baruch Hu was machpid Lev Melech Paras, because it made absolutely no sense how he can go ahead and refuse an obvious victory. V'lo sha'al iyumim, and he didn't care about all the threats and the damage and the surroundings that he saw around him. Ad she yatsa b'mivtza gadol, until there was a tremendous war that was campaigned against him in 12 days, and until eventually Pitzatzu et Garin, the A-bomb that he had, Adak ve'efer, Adak ve'efer, until it was completely annihilated, and then went away, Asher bikesh lashmid la'arog u'la'abed v'la'arog et Yehudim. The threat and the present that was busy, that was on the verge of being la'abed u'la'arog et Elokim, was destroyed. Etzpe Elokim hi. An incredible Megillah, which sometimes, like I said, if you just kind of read it, it kind of gives a different perspective. It says at the end of the Megillah, by the way, V'et Sinvar, V'et Nasral, V'et Tanaya, V'et Hadaf, V'et Sinvar, Machmad, V'et Shachar, V'et Raisi, V'et Asai. No, it's not bad. No, it just keeps getting longer and longer. You have to say it all in one breath, though, because you have to see it all in one shot. Hanifra lanu mitzarenu u'mashalem gmul l'chol avei nafshenu, and was able to go ahead and do it. It's so important to see this all in one perspective, because sometimes we don't realize it. It says a Chassidish Avar, Rabot machshavet b'leiv ish ve'eitzat Hashem hi takum. Usually that means we think many things, but the eitz of Hashem comes standing up. But that's obvious. Obviously we know that what Hashem decides to do, that's takum, that's the one that's going to be successful. Rav Simcha Bunim used to say, he says, Dafka the Rabot machshavot b'leiv ish. It's the machshava that a person gives that causes the eitzot Hashem. The more we put into it to do a certain amount, so that causes the eitzot of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The more we think that we are going to be, to do a certain perspective, to do a certain act, the more we do that, that ends up causing eitzat Hashem hitakum. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the one who has, if we could say, the last laugh. He's the one who does it. And you see it step by step by step. You can't skip any steps in this Megillah that I just read to you. Because if you skip one step, Israel would have been finished. If it was all done bevat achad, you would be in big trouble. The halacha is a koret Megillah lemafreya lo yatsa. If someone reads the Megillah backwards, you are not yotzeh. Now why is that? So some Pirushim say, b'derech again, Chasidi a little bit, that a koret Megillah lemafreya lo yatsa, what that means is don't read it in retrospect. Don't read it as a story in the past, because it's a story that we live day to day. This is Jewish history. This is the Jewish amamano. This is what we live by. Megillat Esther is something that we will always be having during the time of the Galut, and therefore don't read it as lemafreya, as a blast of the past of something that occurred, because it will recur in itself. But there's another pirush, which I think, I don't know if it's my own pirush or not, but Korah Megillah Mafreya Lo Yatzas for a very obvious reason. Because many times, if you want to take a history test, so you read a history book, and you can read history, and it doesn't matter so much if you read the prakim in the proper order. I'll read about the revolution this way, I'll read about the Civil War this way, I'll learn about this president who was that way, I'll learn about this type of history, this type of world war that happened that way. It's not the biggest deal. In the end of the day, facts are the facts. You end up getting the facts. That's not such a big deal. You understand the noise? It's not such a big deal. In the end of the day, you will still end up getting the facts that are necessary. But in Megillat Esther, they're trying to point out something very important. To realize that you can't read it lamafreya. You can't skip prakim. It only works in this order. This is the way it works. Because if anything would have been skipped, the whole entire Megillah would be verfallen. It would be finished. It would be that puzzle with a missing piece. The whole puzzle would fall apart. It can't work. You need every piece in this intimate puzzle of HaKadosh Baruch Hu in order to appreciate the whole entire story. You can't miss a word. You have to read it in a certain seder and suddenly realize, oh, that was built on this. Oh, this was built, I didn't realize. That's why it says at the very end of the Megillah, V'chol ma'aseh tokpo v'gvurato, parshat gedulato shel Mordechai, sher gidlo v'samach. It goes ahead and speaks about the great Gedula of Mordechai is written al Sefer Divrei Yamim l'malchei Madaru Paras. What is this pasuk doing? Everybody asks, well, what's the pasuk doing to say if you want to read about Mordechai, it's written in the Chronicles of Madayu Paras. You know what it's doing? It's coming to tell us that if you want history, go look in Chronicles, go look it up, to get a lot of facts. We skipped hundreds of facts, says Esther. We didn't put in all the facts. We put in the crux. We put in the juice. We want you to appreciate what HaKadosh Baruch Hu is doing for us. Because from here you're able to appreciate, to see, to be witness to the greatness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, something that we are standing in our day and age to be able to be witness to, something you don't always get to do when you see an incredible thing. The pasuk says in Shir Shir, Minei ze omed bekotlenu mashgiach min hachalonot metzitz min hacharikim. What does it mean that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is able to see, and He looks into us through the wall? He sees to us through the wall, and He sees to us through the windows, and He peeks through the cracks. What's the difference? So Rav Saadia Gaon says, Keshosim Ratzon Shel Makom, when they're doing the Ratzon of Hashem, He's mashgiach min hachalonot. He's looking through the windows, as opposed to when they're not doing Ratzon Hashem, He's peeking through the cracks. What's the difference? An incredible pirush that I one time saw to explain this Rav Saadia Gaon is that when we are doing Ratzon Shel Makom, not only does Hashem look at us, but we're able to see Him. When Hashem looks through a window, you're able to see through the window and see Him back. It's reflective. It goes back and forth. You're able to see the one who is being seen. You're able to see back and forth. We're able to see the Yad Hashem. We're able to see the Ashkacha. When we're not doing the Ratzon Shel Makom, when it's not so good, so Hashem peeks through the cracks. He sees us, but we don't see Him. It's very unobvious. It's not always clear. But sometimes the HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives us miracles in order for us to see clarity, in order for us to be able to see Him, not just that He should see us, in order that we can appreciate what we're looking at, in order to appreciate that no, there's no one else to attribute what just happened. There's no tzava that we can attribute it to. There's no great leaders that we can attribute it. We can only attribute it to the Ribono Shel Olam, Eidon Milvado. It makes it so obvious to us, and it makes it so much more juicy, so much more luscious. One time at a kenis to Leiv La'achim, they asked Rabbi Yoshev if he can come and speak. Now he wasn't able to make it, but he sent a message in order to give over. It was during the time of the bus bombings, approximately some 20-some years ago. And it was during the time, it was a very Eitzar Yaakov, and that's why they made this kenis, this get-together. And Rav Volbi sent a message like this: Mizmor LeDavid bevarcho mipnei Avshalom bano. The famous Mizmor, where David HaMelech says that he's singing the praise of Hashem. His own son is coming chasing him, and we know the Gemara in Brachot and Daf Zayin, I think it's in Kiddushin Masechta now, says very clearly that it should be say kina. We're saying kinot today. That should be a kina. His own son is chasing after to knock off his head. You say a kina, and the Gemara says something unusual. It says until then David HaMelech thought that he knew that someone's going to chase after him. He thought it would be a mamzer or an eved or someone not nice, someone inappropriate, and suddenly realized it's his son, so he said mizmor instead of a kina. So it says Rav Yonas and Eibeshitz, what's the pirush Pashup Pshat and what that means? It doesn't make any sense. He says because when HaKadosh Baruch Hu sometimes sends us pruniot, which are tiv'i, which are natural, when we receive a natural spank, so that's it. We don't necessarily see HaKadosh Baruch Hu in between the cracks. We know we got hit. We don't know why. We can explain it to this and that. That's what happened. Over there, Rav Yashav was speaking about the bus bombings. But when we're getting spanked in a completely unusual way, when things are so haphazard, things can't be explained in any other way, except for that there's something miraculous going on, that's HaKadosh Baruch Hu's Mashgiach Min HaChalonot. David HaMelech was happy to see such an unusual thing, that Avshalom himself, his own son, was chasing after him because he realized this can only come from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Nothing else is going to happen. It can only be a yad. So it's so good, it's so luscious, it's so enjoyable sometimes when we know it's the Yad Hashem. It's so much better than when we think it's a natural phenomenon. We realize and we appreciate, and we feel much more connected to this concept. With this, I want to bring out something very important. With this, I'm basically going to come to a close. Okay? When we talk about seeing the Yad Hashem and everything that we've been surrounded by, appreciating what we've seen, is because here we are, we read from the Megillat Esther. This time was Megillat Simchat Torah, different Megillah. Seder, maybe one day it'll be printed. But Al Kopanim, we're reading the idea of the Megillah, as we all know. The pasuk tells us, "V'nahapachu." Who knows and who doesn't forget the whole theme of the whole entire Megillah is the idea of v'nahapachu. Because as we all know, many times, and especially the most intricate times, HaKadosh Baruch Hu works, and you have to hear the reason why. This is very important, very yesodi, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu sometimes works dafka, the ra, what looked like bad, ended up turning back on his own face. He gets smacked back in the face. I don't have to go through the Megillah. Everybody knows how Haman put Esther into the castle. Haman himself put up the tree, etc., as we're all familiar with. But we see this concept over and over again. When the brothers were selling Yosef, it ended up getting right back to being Mekayim the Chalamot. The dreams that they were running away from came right back to them because they sold them. Or when the kids were being thrown, when the little babies were being thrown in the ocean, so Paro himself, right under his nose, would be raising up a Moshe Rabbeinu. The Gemara in Sukkah, where Shlomo HaMelech was told by the Malach HaMavet, he's trying to get his hands on two of his servants, and he quickly ran them to Ir Luz. He wanted to get them to the impenetrable city of Luz, where they wouldn't die, and they died at the Shar of Luz, right in the gates of Luz. And the Malach HaMavet was so happy because he said, I needed them to be in the gates of Luz in order to kill them. I was waiting for that. This is the idea of coming back and forth. The Goyim took this. There's something called the Oedipus Rex theorem in mythology, where the Imam stole this straight from us. This whole idea. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu dafka works v'nahapachu. The point of Ra ends up coming back, smacking back into his face. When this Rasha Sinwar was going to go in Lashminu Larog, he didn't only destroy himself and everybody around him, he caused a domino effect to destroy even the people that were behind the proxy. And Persia himself didn't realize the trouble they were getting themselves into. Dafka the Ra ends up being the source of Tov. What looked like something very depressing, and of course it's very depressing, Rahman al-Atzal, what happened on Simchat Torah, October 7th, was something that should never happen, and Kosh Baruch Hu Bar Minan should keep us away from such things. But when we see sometimes things like that, Kosh Baruch Hu shows us, you see you guys thought everything's bad. You see people that I know people that were upset at Kosh Baruch Hu. Yes, people were saying, I know people who didn't want to go to shul for a while, not here, and maybe in Santa Brita in America. And suddenly Kosh Baruch Hu, he's showing us a little bit. We only see a little tipa in the yam, just a little bit, to be able to see. But you see, there was something behind it. It wasn't stam haphazard. There was some meaning behind it, that what I don't do it for not. There was some tachlit behind it. What you think is a mistake is just a misinterpretation. What you think sometimes is what we call absolute evil. In the end of the day, v'nahapachu, Kadosh Baruch Hu turns it back. Atem omrim pen yerbu. You were trying to. Kadosh Baruch Hu says to Mitzrayim, you're trying to say they shouldn't procreate, and I say ken yerbu, and I say the more. Dafka, when one direction is coming, it's coming and it's proven that everything we thought was a facade. Everything we thought in the first place is really just an optical illusion. The more the Ra kind of implodes, it gets bigger and bigger, or we called as a big X, it ended up being a Gilui of the Shekhinah. We're able to see a Kadosh Baruch Hu in action. Well, we realized that we were blinded. You understand? This is just one little piece of many times of what occurs many times in our life, until we're able to get to a stage of Hayinu Kechomim. We realize that we're only dreaming. We didn't realize what was internally happening. And the beauty behind this, and like I said, with this I'm basically coming to a close. The beauty behind this is sometimes when we see something happening difficult in our own personal life, you're supposed to take that, instead of just being a difficulty, to a challenge, to an opportunity. There's no way that we can ever pick our pieces up until we actually sometimes fall. Sometimes the falling is a point of sensation, of being able to succeed. On the contrary, from all the examples I gave you, Hapachu tells you that no, it's not just like a bad movie where you have the good guys and the bad guys and then eventually the good guys win. Because you're showing that there was a bad side. What are you doing? There's no bad side. There is no side of bad in the world. Whereas HaKadosh Baruch Hu, by showing the whole idea of Hapachu, this whole idea of how everything just comes back in a big circle, is coming to show you that the Ra was also a piece, an intricate piece in the puzzle, and it was a necessary piece in the puzzle. It was something that was necessary to there. It wasn't just bad and good, and we had to get rid of the bad, and B'ezrat Hashem will be okay. Mashiach is going to come and vanquish. No. It's not good. He's going to come and be Megilla Lemafreya, just like Yosef was Megillah to the brothers. In retrospect, that everything you thought was a problem was really a success. Everything you thought wasn't meant to be, it really ended up being for the Tovah. That's what it was supposed to be. That's the idea in general of an hapachu. And therefore, every challenge that we receive, every place that something happens, should be seen as an opportunity. This is the place where I'm going to make a change. There was someone who lost a job. And instead of being upset and depressed, he was happy. He said, now instead of being meshubad, instead of being subdued to a maskaret, to a constant salary, I'm going to now try to go ahead and build my own business. At the same time, I'll have more time to learn. Until then, I didn't have a chance. He took this as an opportunity, and he built himself up, and he was able to become an extremely successful businessman from such a phenomenon. Every person, don't you cherish the fact that, wow, I wish I could have that smart child who is just a boy wonder. Everything just went easy, always got hundreds on his tests. And things just kind of flowed with him. It didn't have to be any challenges. Well, if you check statistics, they show that those children are usually not the ones that succeed. Because everything came so easy and came so fluid that they were never challenged in their life. They never utilized their capabilities. It's the ones that were challenged and rose to the occasion. The one that made a change in themselves, they're the one that are actually much able to succeed. When a person is having difficulty in his marriage, instead of taking it as something as a reason to just finish it off enough, it's a reason to start understanding what a relationship is about. What's a woman about? What's an idea of dealing with other people or dealing with the difficulties of life? Or where am I supposed to grow from here? How am I supposed to affect my own self in order to make the change? There was a person that I actually read about. I did not speak about such a person, but I did read about such a person, that whenever he, when especially Sfaradim, they give a present to the Shadchan when it succeeds, when it comes through. You're really supposed to give more than a present, but better. He would actually go ahead and give a present to every Shidduch that did not succeed. Because he realized that every Shidduch that didn't succeed was the next step to where he's supposed to get to. He knew there was a certain amount of Shidduchim that he has to go through in order to get where he needs to. And then, in the end of the day, he was able to get to where he needed to get to. I wouldn't mind finding a Shidduch for him. Rabbi Akiva, who is one of the greatest of the people that we know, Rabbi Akiva, the greatest of all Tanaim, of course we know he made a full changeover. And everybody knows, for those who know the basic minimums of Rabbi Akiva, knows that he was the man who always saw the positive side of the fence. He always, in the end of the Gemara in Makot, as everybody's familiar with, because it's a small Masechta, whenever they saw the Shual, the fox, going out of the Beit HaMikdash, he was the one who was laughing. At the time when he lost his chamor and his tarnagul and his candles and this, and things didn't look good, as we all know, he was very into his Gamzu Latova, Kol David Rahman Latova. He was always the man that was there behind it, even when he was being painfully destroyed, painfully killed, and he didn't know what was going to lead to next. He was the man that in the end of the day went and was smiling that he was able to be Makadosh Shem Shamayim. Over and over again, all these Gemaras, and people just say, he looked at the silver lining, he had an Ayin Tovah, he was a good person. No. He read Megillat Esther. He was the one who was able to see Milamala. He looked at a helicopter view and he saw the future in the present. He saw the pain as a success. He was already able to see what will be already from now, from the very beginning. He knew the Shulchan Aruch that said, there's a halacha. The halacha, it's not just a nice idea, nice Musar Sefer and Musar Sharm. A person has to make a bracha on something difficult just like on something happy. It's difficult. No one says to avoid it. Like the Chofetz Chaim says, just don't call it ra, call it mar. It's bitter. There's something wrong. It hurts. That's fine. But the struggle is what gives birth to the greatness. That's the man who realized that, and that's why Rabbi Akiva made the changeover he did at 40 years old. Because he's the one that always saw the whole entire picture. He was the one who was way ahead and to do it, and that's why every month is this man of Simcha, Adar, Nisan. Av is considered as such a good time? I'm not sure. Av is a time when Mashiach is born. Av is a tremendous amount of casualties that happen, but a tremendous amount of successes. We have Tu B'Av that occurs. It's called a Moed. We don't have Tachadun, as we're familiar with. We see that Av is a very funny type of holiday, because on the contrary, the fact that there is a drop, the fact that there is a breakage, that's the point where we know the success will occur. That's where we're able to take the month and use it in a tremendous amount of success. And this is really what we're struggling with when we're discussing the idea of the Beit HaMikdash, because when we discuss the Beit HaMikdash, what we're missing is the source of truth. At the time of the Beit HaMikdash, everything was real. It was palpable. Everything was truth. We didn't just believe in the Kadosh Baruch Hu, we knew Hashem. He was in front of our eyes. It was something that was so straight that we wouldn't make a mistake. It wouldn't fall to the wayside. In that time, there would be absolute clarity and no type of sadness, and that's something that unfortunately we don't realize what we're missing. And that's really what we're davening for now, because when we get there, we'll be able to appreciate what it is. And I'll end with a story of a person who really took a challenge and utilized it to the best. His name was Omer Shem Tov. He was captured, unfortunately, by the Hamas, and he was in a deep tunnel. At the time when he was a tremendous, and this is a non-religious person, completely not religious, came from a non-religious family. And when he was down there, they were taking calculation, him and the person he was with at the time, figuring out what day was Friday. They wouldn't miss the day. They would always try to count the days through the hours in order to be able to remember, because they wanted to know which day was Sunday, Monday, Friday, and to be able to know what was Friday and Shabbat. As they were there, when it came to Friday night, he said, we didn't keep Shabbat, we didn't do anything. But I do remember that we used to make something called Kiddush. We had Kiddush with a little bit of bread at the time that we did it. And they were upset. They told the guy who was watching them, the Mechabel that was watching them, he said, we need wine. Ad kedei kach, that apparently he accompanied, he was willing to concede. And he actually brought them a bottle of wine. He said, this is it, but that's it. He gave them a bottle of wine. He said that they realized, it could be, last time we saw Gilad Shalit was there for many, many years. So we don't know how long we're going to be here. So what they did was, they said, okay, let's make Kiddush, but we have to save this bottle of wine. Who knows how long it's going to last? They took the bottle cap and they poured a little bit of wine inside of it, and they made Kiddush on top of the wine. He knew it by heart because he heard it for many years. Like I say, he didn't keep anything except for this one thing. He drank half and he drank half. They each drank a little bit from a bottle cap, and they kept the rest of the bottle for next Shabbat. But they said, what about the bread? So they were given a pita. Every night they received one pita. And they had a few pretzels in their pocket. They saved the pretzels every day. This is what he himself testified. He got out, Baruch Hashem. He took off one pretzel a day, and they took off the salt off the pretzel one time a day to put it down. And then they would dip the bread into the salt in order to have their pita with salt, of course, because the minhag, that was very chashuv, that they realized it must be very important to dip it in salt. So they dipped it inside of the salt in order to be mekayem this mitzvah. An incredible mesirat nefesh of a person who was able to take a challenge and turn it into an opportunity to be able to make a change. Having said that, you should know, parenthetically, they found when they were getting close to them, they ran away and they were taken away. Meaning, when they went close to the tunnels, the army almost got to them, but they weren't successful. But they left behind a notebook. They found his notebook, this Omer. They found his notebook, and it was secretly given to his parents. It wasn't publicized because they didn't want Hamas to know, because it would cause him problems in the thing. And they read it was written over there about different events over there. But they noticed a few pages that said one word over and over again. Food, ochel, mayim, ochel, mayim. That's what it said a number of times. And he had drawings there of pictures of a hamburger. He drew pictures of food because he was just dreaming about it. I'm mentioning this is the same person that saved that bottle of wine in order to make kiddush on it with his bread and his pita. He didn't eat the pretzels in his pockets because he was saving the salt to dip his pita inside of it. Do you see what we're talking about? Ad kedei kach. Eventually, you should know that this person, while he was in the tunnel, his friend got out and he was there by himself. But his friend told the parents that you should know he was Mekabel on himself to keep Shabbat. He told his parents you should know he was Mekabel on himself to keep Shabbat, which was very surprising to his parents. But they said to his friend, well, it's not really so hard to keep Shabbat when you're in a tunnel and there's not much to do. There's no cigarettes, there's no phone, there's no anything. So what do you mean that he keeps Shabbat? He says, well, guess what? The electricity, when it was destroyed, when it was taken down, we shut down the electricity at a certain stage. The only way that they were able to be in the tunnel was each hostage was given a flashlight. He actually got the zchut of having a flashlight, believe it or not. And he said he made sure on Shabbat that his flashlight was not on. He kept his flashlight off in order not to keep it on for the whole 25 hours. He kept it off during that time period, and he did not turn it on and off during the whole entire Shabbat. His mother, who visited him every day. How did she visit him? So they describe it over there. Every day she would walk into his room, look in the mirror, and she would start talking to her son, Kebiyocho, by looking in the mirror. She said, if that's what you did, I'm going to do it also. And she herself was also Mekabel Shabbat. She also was Mekabel Shabbat. I think we know many other stories. I said a story that I think is less popular. That's why I mentioned it. But this is the miftzah that HaKadosh Baruch Hu went on. This is the campaign that HaKadosh Baruch Hu went on after that first parak of the Megillah, which we saw what occurred. We see how far that people come, Mika Amcha Yisrael, the amount of Mesiras Nefesh that we're able to do because we all want to come back to Avinu Shabashamayim. We all are there and we all know that everything would happen is only L'tovatenu. And B'ezrat Hashem, HaKadosh Baruch Hu should bring the rest of the hostages back. We should only say Simcha B'Yameinu. HaKadosh Baruch Hu should build the Beit HaMikdash B'Mira B'Yameinu. And you know, every time on Tisha B'Av, everyone wonders what's there to cry about. I think we have no problems these days. I think these days you're able to say, and I just want to end with one piece. We've seen this recurring over and over again. And obviously, the reason why we succeeded in this country, we have a tremendous hakarat tov to the people that are protecting us, to the army, and it's chas v'shalom never not to deny ever a karat tov to the people who are protecting us and risking their lives for us in order to be able to stay in the Beit HaMidrash. But we also have to know, and it's very important to know, elef l'mateh, elef l'mateh. It doesn't work without people who are staying and learning the Beit HaMidrash. The people that are there, that are keeping us alive, that is there. And this happens all the time. I don't even know why people don't see the connection. Here they are absolutely attacking all the Lomdei Torah. They're trying to get them all out of the Beit HaMidrash to be able to do as much as they can. The Giyus is going to anyone. Don't listen to anyone. It's going to the biggest learners that you've ever seen in their life. It's going to absolutely every single person. I know myself, trust me. That it's going to anyone. Even people who are Masmidim Gemorim is going to that. Always this happens. Just look in the history. When that happens, the world hates our guts. They scream at us. We're sitting here being terrorized by all these countries that are calling us evil people and all the atrocities that we're doing. And it's almost like mimicking the same words that these leftists are saying at the Haredim, at the people in the thing. You guys are causing it. It's all your fault. It's all you. It's almost the same words almost. If you even listen, it's almost the same type of gestures. So at least if we're appreciating the miracles, if we see the Yad Hashem, the Megillah Hashem, we should realize that it works when we go hand in hand together. And Baruch Hashem, we should always back them up and we should be there. And B'ezrat Hashem, HaKadosh Baruch Hu should bring the Geula, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu should take away the Sina for Mordechai. What we know, that in the time of Ikvita, the Mashiach, the Chochmah is Nimeset, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu that HaKadosh Baruch Hu Kebiyochol, it leads to the other people that they are chasing after the Talmidei Chachamim. But if we're able to get around this, B'ezrat Hashem, HaKadosh Baruch Hu should bring the Hatzalah B'Mihrat B'Yameinu. Amen.